Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about relationships with our partners, our kids, people around us, and how our nervous system plays a role in that, and how really attunement is the gold standard of our relationships, and how we can start becoming more attuned to those around us. So I had the cutest conversation with my son the other night, and it was so cute because he came up with this, and he said the most profound thing. He said, "Sometimes I like to be me, and sometimes I wish I were someone else." And it was so sweet. And so I'm doing this thing in parenthood where I'm just pausing and kind of listening and sticking with it instead of answering or pushing it in a different direction. And so I said, because you know what, again, like so often our response is like, oh, but you're great. Oh, but why wouldn't you want to be you? Which how invalidating to someone when they just said something so profound to kind of push them in one direction. And so I was like, well, oh, what do you mean? Like, what is it that you like about you? And what is it that why you wish you weren't you? And he said, well, my sister never gets in trouble. So I wish I were like my sister because I would never get in trouble. But I like being me because I have friends and I like to ride my bike, which is so cute because he like rides his bike to school every morning and he's so sweet with it. So, and then I said, that makes so much sense. And then I had everyone go around our room. We were all like just relaxing on the bed before bed. And I had everyone go around the room and I was like, why do you like being you and what do you wish you were someone else? And we had this conversation. And after it, I was talking to my husband and I said, I encouraged that conversation with him because I feel like that is the key to happiness and satisfaction with ourselves. The key to satisfaction and happiness with ourselves is holding two truths. The truth that there's amazing things about being us and the truth that there's hard things about being us or undesirable things about being us. And there's always going to be this tension between all the great things and some of the hard things. And the more we can accept both parts of ourselves, the more we can actually love ourselves. It's not actually, and that the more we can accept that about other people. I love this about you, and I don't love this about you. And what I always say is the distance between our strengths and our weaknesses are held on a very short thread. So I can be really good at my job because I'm really sensitive and empathetic and can pick up on a lot of information. And I'm really tormented in life sometimes because I'm sensitive and can pick up on a lot of information. So I get my feelings hurt a lot and I get overwhelmed easy. So this thing in one area that's such a gift is also part of something that is such a struggle for me. We're just so quick right now to want to change everything and maximize everything and make everything better. And I'm like, the biggest part of this is having bigger hands to hold both things and to be able to acknowledge my shortcomings so that I own that and I'm not trying to make people think I'm another way or try to be another way, but I'm owning it and I'm accounting for my shortcomings. And I think with our children, with our friends, and with our partners, can we be better at holding that space for all of us? And that we can hold that someone's really great at one thing and not great at another. And that's real love. That's unconditional love. It's I have a basin that can hold all of it versus I'm only going to love the part that's really good. And we got to get out of this pattern of only loving the part that's really good because that's not how it works. We need to give up the hope that people will change because honestly, and I know a lot of therapists think everyone changes and that's amazing. I actually think people stay consistent. I think of the people in my life, they've been pretty consistent. And we can look at it as a negative, but again, we got to start looking at then the environment needs to change. We talked about before, why am I overextending myself so you'll change? Why don't I accept who you are and then figure out how to take care of myself within that? With my kids, such a freedom moment has happened when I've stopped trying to change who they are and I started accepting and working with who they are. And that sounds easy and it sounds so simple. Like, yeah, just accept your kids as they are. Duh. That's not actually what's happening. Parenting right now looks like we're accepting, but we're just trying to change them through empathy and understanding. We're still not fully accepting them. And I say that because my oldest has really, really put me through the ringer in having to expand past everything I thought. would be, everything who I thought I would be, how I thought he would be. Like, it has had to make me change the way I'm looking at it. I realized how much of my parenting had been based on principles and ideals and not actually him and what works for him. A lot of my philosophies came from a philosophical place, not the kid that I had in front of me. And the more I lean into the 3 kids I have in front of me and what each of them needs, the more I can actually be an attuned present parent. And the more I try to push them into the version of them that I think they should be, the more I become unintentionally a really unhelpful parent. When I was pregnant, I was so intense about this. I was like, sleep is important to me. I'm going to figure sleep out. I did the sleep training. I had my son, like, his sleep was perfect. It was awesome. Like, we had this down. And then as he got out of his crib, it got harder and harder. And I was holding on because I was not going to have a kid who slept in my room. And I was not going to have a kid who stayed up late. I had this whole plan of how it was supposed to be. And if I just did the right steps, it would end up in that place. And finally, at some point, I accepted defeat. Because it's like, am I going to keep fighting this for the next however many years out of principle because he's supposed to be in his own room and doing his own thing? And this is such a great example of this. I can't change him, but I can't change me. And there's this really weird message going in parenting that we're understanding that we co-regulate, but then we've shifted co-regulating to mean parent regulates child. To me, co-regulation means that while I can bring you to calm, you can bring me to crazy. If you're in crazy, I'm more likely to be crazy. If I'm calm, you're more likely to be calm. But my kids will knock me off center as much as anyone because it's not, oh, they're little, you're big. My nervous system's reacting to the state of the people around me. So I am also being thrown off when things aren't regulated. And so, number one, we have to understand that we are participating in this relationship and that gets to be there. And I'm not somehow separate from my child. I'm older. I can think of things better. My brain has developed more. That's amazing. But I'm still a human and I actually still have a nervous system that still reacts in certain ways to certain things. So, okay. Using my brain and my ability to think this through, I could tell that it was freaking him out. The way I was doing bedtime was terrorizing him, freaking him out. He was alone. He was scared. He was crying. And then the part of me that's like, well, you have to learn to deal with this. Da, 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 da. And finally, the surrender was, I can't have a kid in my bed because I can't sleep. It throws me off. But you can't be alone because it freaks you out and throws you off. So I bought a $25 cot on Amazon. I put it on the floor and he's allowed to sleep next to me. And he sleeps like the best sleep he's ever had of his life. I sleep great because I don't have a kid in my bed. And that works for us. But oh my gosh, if you had told Leanne 7 years ago this would be your life, she would be like, nope, nope, not going to happen. That's a failure. You can make it work. But the amount of peace we both have in this setup is amazing. And he hasn't changed. He still likes to be around me. He still needs that. I haven't changed. I still need my sleep and my space. But we found a way to make it work where we're both being held in the household versus one or the other. The way we're talking about parenting right now is very much that adults have a nervous system here and kids have a nervous system here. And our nervous system is more advanced than their nervous system. And I don't believe that to be true because it's our nervous system. It's our fight or flight. It's our baseline. It's the animal brain that developed first. So our animal brain is our animal brain. The thing that adults have is we have a very developed grown-up brain that can think through things. But when triggered, none of us are in that part of our brain. We don't access that part of our brain when we're triggered. And our partners are the same. We're triggering each other all the time and then getting mad that we're not being there to support each other when we're triggering each other. Like, the thing is, when we look at it from a nervous system perspective, and this, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to share this because this has changed my entire life with my children. I was just laying in bed last night with my husband and I said, the night was crazy, but I said, looking at it through the lens of regulation has changed me as a parent because when everything happened with each kid, I mean, each kid had their moment of dysregulation. And when I addressed it as this is a moment of dysregulation, not this is a tantrum, this is bad behavior, this is all the other things that were showing up, I was able to actually effectively get everyone back where they needed to be from their nervous system, not just from a punishment behavior perspective, if that makes sense. And so the example is my son hit his sister. And normally I would have, because it's the end of a long day, a lot's been happening, and I would have been like, how dare you hit your sister? Or that would have been my more dysregulated self, or my more parenting self. And again, the parenting that I'm not loving right now, you're having big feelings. How did you feel? Which again, after I lose my cool, I don't want someone like therapizing me. Like, I just got upset. It's not that deep. I got mad. I'm like, move on. So what I did instead was I just held him, because, I put him on his bed and I got his sister set, and then I went back and I held him. I'm like, you've had a really hard day. He was dysregulated because he couldn't have a cupcake and everyone else could, which for a kid is a big deal. He couldn't have a cupcake because it dysregulates him, but even the situation dysregulated him. But like, I just held him and I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I started rocking him. He's bigger. He doesn't need to be rocked. But I know from a nervous system perspective that rocking helps reset our nervous system. So I start rocking him to get his nervous system back in alignment. And I'm just, rocking him, talking to him. And I'm like, I know you've had a long day. I know it was hard. Like, let's have some water and then I said, let's go watch Arthur, which I love that Arthur's still a thing he watches because it's my childhood throwback. And so, but I knew that would help regulate him, because I have a kid whose brain is, I call it his busy brain. When he gets dysregulated, he gets a busy brain, and his busy brain wants to talk and he wants to do things and he wants to get in fights with his sister. And so I've had to find ways. What are ways that help him calm his brain down, get his brain back? So I'm like, okay. So I soothed him. The busy brain happened. Let's start a show that I know will help start regulating you. His sister had a really hard time in gymnastics. And I was feeling like, am I being a bad parent because I'm keeping her in gymnastics when she's crying and having this hard time? And again, it's kind of like, again, as a parent, you got to see, I'm like, we have to know, when do we push, when do we not push? But the answer is not always don't push, and the answer isn't always push. So I'm thinking of it. And then she told me a story, and she said, when I was at school, the fire alarm kept going off and it made me cry. Fire alarms went off, it made you cry. I said, oh my gosh, you were already overstimulated, because you don't normally cry at school. So to me, the fire alarm already overstimulated you. No wonder at gymnastics you were crying more than usual. You had already been so overstimulated. So then to be in the environment that's more stimulation, that's really hard. And I said to her, oh my gosh, sweetie, you're overstimulated. She's so cute. She's 5. She's like, I was overstimulated. Like, she said it in the cutest way. And then you could just see it help her. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, she's been overstimulated. I got a little Epsom salt bath with like eucalyptus, stress relief oil. I'm like, you in a bubble bath? I'm like, you hop in the bubble bath. And I'm like, let's just wash all that off. Like, it's been a long day. And you could just see her feel so heard and seen by me. Like, so I wasn't talking about gymnastics or school. Like, those were all the thoughts in my head. But it was like, oh, you're overstimulated. Okay, yeah, let's get that. Let's help with that. Then my other little girl started losing it. I look at the clock. It's 8:30. She's been running around with her siblings all afternoon picking them up. So I just swept her up, snuggled her, and I'm like, put her favorite show, with a calming show on to help bring her down. And the point is, like, the other me who's looking at their behavior would have tried to correct all this behavior. And once I start realizing the nervous system, I can start really tending to, what is your nervous system needing? How are we going to get you back into regulation? And then we can figure out what we need from that point. And the thing is, that's the same for us though. So it's so easy to see in little kids, but that's the same for us as parents and partners. No good can come from places more overstimulated and dysregulated. And we're not superhumans who can step over someone else's dysregulation. And so sometimes the best thing we need to do is step away and regulate ourselves, not trying to regulate with someone who's dysregulated, if that makes sense. So my kid can't regulate me. That's not their job. But I can't stay regulated in the space of all this dysregulation if I'm already overloaded, because I'm not a superhuman. And so sometimes I need to be able, A, there's practices I have to do to keep myself regulated in general, and B, there's things I have to do that help me regulate when I'm getting dysregulated, where I step away and have to tag myself out or have to give myself a minute so that I can regulate. So let's talk about what real co-regulation is. Real co-regulation isn't trying to be a superhuman while someone else is losing their mind. That's heroic and amazing, but that's not sustainable. And a lot of women are burning out because they're trying to be the regulators of dysregulated people, dysregulated spouses, dysregulated coworkers, dysregulated children, dysregulated friends. And so what we want to do, and we look at it this way, okay, the world is going to dysregulate us. Our families are going to dysregulate us. How do we set our relationships up to be a gas station of regulation? I was listening to a podcast, and in the podcast, this guy was saying that something small that he did in his relationship that really changed things, and he didn't think it would make such a big difference, is 4 times a day, 15 seconds of skin-to-skin contact. We should all be aiming for things like that. Rituals of regulation is what I'm going to call them. We all need rituals of regulation in our romantic relationships to stay connected, because life will dysregulate us. And so I want you to really look at, like, how am I helping my partner regulate, and how am I regulating within my relationship? So Mel Robbins talked about how her husband had this thing where he'll see her start to get dysregulated. I don't know if she uses words, but get upset, and he'll come and just put his hands on her shoulders. Just lovingly put his hands on her shoulders. And I see this a lot. I think touch in relationships, we've like lost almost the art of how to use touch and contact in our relationships, not in a sexual way, but in a regulating. And so I say this because we're triggering each other all the time in our relationships. We're falling into old patterns. We're doing those things. We're feeling unloved, uncared for, and that will dysregulate us. Feeling those feelings will knock us out of alignment, because that's who we are as people. And women are going to be more sensitive to it than men. It doesn't mean that both parties don't feel it, but women are going to be more. We're almost like, it's like the old knee when the wind changes and you're like, it's about to rain. It's like women are like that. Like, I feel something deep in my bones that's not even apparent yet. And so we really want to set our relationships up to be a space of regulation so these things don't get out of control, because we feel connected. Most of our problems in the relationship happen when we feel disconnected from the other person. And then a cut will start to get infected. It's kind of like a dirty environment where, like, if you're not keeping a clean environment, any cut is going to become an infection and it's going to become a problem. And so we want to be really creating rituals where we're coming back together. And when we start to feel ourselves getting triggered by our partners, we need to take a moment and regulate together, or we need to take a moment and take some space and get regulated so that we can move forward. In order to have, and here's the word I'm going to use, I'm not just going to use a healthy relationship because that's so broad. It's kind of like the term self-love. I don't love the term self-love because it's so big. What does it mean? How do we wrap our arms around it? How do you know if you love yourself or not? It's like, what are the qualities of love that you want to make sure you're giving to yourself? That's a more manageable thing. And when we talk about healthy relationships, it feels a little big and a little broad. And how are we testing health? The word I want to replace with health is attuned. Attunement is the base for a good relationship. Me being attuned to the needs of others makes me a good mom and a good wife. And my husband being attuned to my needs and the kids' needs makes him a good partner and a good spouse. So attunement is the word I want to look at. And so we want attunement to be the goal of our relationships. And the question to be, how do I stay attuned with my partner? How do I stay attuned with my family? There's a lot of different ways to do this. There's in the moment, kind of assessing the situation. As I talked about with my kids, when they're starting to get out of whack, it's stepping back. What do they need here? Not what do I need from them? No. What do they need? Because no one likes to lose their mind. So if someone's losing their mind, they're not getting what they need. Because my friend Kay said this perfect. She was in HR for a lot of years. She said, no one wants to do a bad job. No one wants to be a crappy employee. So if they're a bad employee, it's because maybe they're not qualified and can't do it, or maybe they don't have the skills to do it, or maybe something's interrupting, but that's not the goal. So no one wants to lose it. Our kids don't want to lose it. Our partners don't want to lose it. No one wants to be losing it. So if they're losing it, they're missing something they need. So when we look from an attuned space, the question is always, what do they need? Not what do I need about what they need. No. What do they need? Not what do I need from them. No. What do they need? In this moment, what do they need? If your spouse is calling you, crying, I'm so mad, you're not helping me out enough, da 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 da. That's not the time to defend yourself. It's the time to ask, what do you need? I'm here. What do you need? And you know what? Also, the time for you to use your eyes and figure out what they need. Because when I'm overwhelmed, I don't always know what I need, and I don't always want to tell you what I need. Sometimes I feel guilty asking for what I need. So I need you to step back and look at what I need and try it out. You think I need a massage? Book it. You think I need a night out? Get the sitter. Like, that's the other thing about this is if we're really going to be attuned and we're really going to be good, we still need to step in and try something for someone and not wait for them to tell us what it is. Don't even get me started on that. When we say women need to start asking for support, my newest theory is we need to start looking at why aren't women willing to ask for support and why do they have to ask? Because if your partner's attuned and you're attuned to your partner, you should be able to step in a little bit more. I'm not saying that we don't need to practice asking for what we need, but I'm saying that a lot of times we know what we need, we want to ask, and we feel bad about it. So instead of making someone who already feels bad feel worse because they don't ask, why don't we start looking at what our partner's doing and stepping in for? So that's all about attunement. And so when we look at our relationships to the base of attunement, we also want to look at the base of regulation. So I'm attuned to your needs and I want you to stay regulated. So then we need to have this structure to keep kind of our finger on the pulse of what's happening. We need weekly check-ins. Where are you at? Where are we at? What was the hardest part of your week? Do you know the hardest part of your partner's week? Do you know the hardest part of your kid's week? If you're like me, probably not unless you specifically ask. We might think we know, but we don't know. What if someone's struggling with this thing that all along you could have done, you just didn't know was a problem? So we want to have check-ins for attunement. We want to have check so we can stay attuned. We want to have daily check-ins. I love for partnerships, for kids, finger on the pulse, the call on the way home. Hey, what's up? Oh my gosh, the kids are running around. No one's listening. I'm so stressed. Well, then as the partner, I know I got to put my game face on. I got to be ready to show up and take the load on and take over because it's a lot. Or, oh, we're all having fun playing in the backyard. Okay, I got to be like kind of mellow and ready just to chill a little bit. Like how part of attunement is knowing where are we at. So I can't be attuned if I don't know what's happening. And so we want that. And then once you have this base in your relationship where you're checking in, your finger on the pulse, you know your job is to stay attuned. Now you or your partner starts to get dysregulated. You have this foundation. You can say, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. I'm starting to feel off. That really hurt my feelings. And then you hear that really hurt my feelings. Oh man, that's physical as well as mental. So what do I need to kind of bring them back in? And so why I say this is in the moment, it's kind of like we do the work outside of the issue so that in the issue we have what we need to do it once we need it. We got to build up these strong systems so that as things go wrong, we have the system to fall back on. A lot of times people are only doing the work when there's a crisis. And so it's kind of like living in a tent your whole life because it's like we put up this first aid Red Cross tent. We never built the hospital. And so we only go to the tent when we're hemorrhaging. We don't get these little cuts stitched up. And we need to start building hospitals in our relationships instead of relying on these Red Cross tents every time there's an issue.